Out front now, Bill Kristol, editor-at-large of The Bulwark, and 2 decades ago, Carlson worked for him at the Weekly Standard, and Juliette Kayyem, former Homeland Security Assistant Secretary and our national security analyst. Good evening, Bill. Let me begin with you as I sort of pick my jaw up off the floor as someone who worked with Carlson. Granted, he's changed a lot since you did, but what do you make of this?
I mean, it's appalling. He's been pretty appalling for quite a while, but this is just another, this is another step down the road to just giving up on any pretense of not just reporting the news or analyzing the news, but what he's doing is inciting violence, dealing in the most terrible conspiracy theories, claiming that the U.S. government is waging a war on terror on American citizens. Here's the way I was thinking about it as I watched it again here. I mean, would Tucker Carlson be upset if there were another January 6th? How could one say that he would be? Isn't this just an incitement to another January 6th? Is that what Tucker Carlson wants?
And the imagery, Juliette, that we just showed in that clip, which, by the way, is going to be a series. There's going to be a lot of that imagery. It is, I just wonder from a national security perspective, what it means to you.
It's meant to create outrage. The purpose of this is fueling anger, and it's because Tucker Carlson, Fox News, but also remember all the Republican senators and congressmen willing to go on air and kiss his ring is to continue to incite violence for 2 purposes. One is, of course, to make violence and the threat of violence part of our democracy, which it clearly is now, and that goes to the voting rights purges, to the attacks on secretaries of state. But the second reason is these mini January 6th, which we should pay attention to, whether it's at school board meetings about masking, a violent protest at an NBA game because one of the players isn't allowed to play, or some of the protests surrounding vaccinations and some of the violence that we see. He's creating mini January 6th to create violence, to continue to create violence and the threat of violence, because that's the only way they win. That's their ammunition. That's their political strategy now. And that's why these prosecutions and everything else being done are so important.
This is obviously, Bill, coupled with the persistent and continuing big lie pushed by the president and so many others. But you've got Fox News, owned by Murdoch, and Murdoch's Wall Street Journal editorial page that put out that lie-filled op-ed by Trump, and then defending it today with this statement saying, we think it's news when an ex-president who may run in 2024 wrote what he did, even if, or perhaps especially if, his claims are bananas. How do you see it?
This is the role the Journal has played. Fox News has played the role of the instigator of, as Juliette says, of violence, of conspiracy theories, of creating anger and hatred and resentments, to say the least, among the American people. The Wall Street Journal's role is to speak to the elites, to the establishment, and to go along with that. But occasionally to say it's a little crazy. Some of these things Trump is saying, kind of bananas, as if they're just kind of harmless, silly fantasies he has. Maybe he has some odd views about the moon being created out of cheese or something. But that's not it. Trump wants to overturn the next election. He wants to overturn the last one. He wants to limit voting and overturn elections at the state level and create the predicate for a real overturning usurpation of democracy in this country. And so the establishment enablers, the establishment acquiescers, the establishment excusers and minimizers of the damage, I really think they have as much to answer for as the more rabid conspiracy theorists at Fox News.
And, you know, reading what the Journal editorial board put out today, there was a strong check, point-by-point fact check of the president's claims. They could have, by the way, Juliette, done that in tandem. If they're going to publish what the president said, they could have done it in real time on the other part of the page or what have you. But big picture, what does this do to those that believe the lies?
I mean, this is what is so outrageous about what the Wall Street Journal did. Is to quote the president, it gives a fleece vest to this radicalization, right? It's a radicalization in a fancy fleece vest, and that's exactly what the Wall Street Journal has done at this stage. So you have to think about what radicalization is. It is you need your army. That's what Tucker Carlson is doing, and then you need people to forgive the army, to say, oh, they're really not that bad. We're going to excuse them, and this is sort of a perfect storm that we're seeing now. And it's just a shame that that you don't have a strong political pushback from the radicalization that is going on. And so it is heading towards, whether it's the elections and you eventually silence it, it's the deplatforming, which has to continue to be done, it's these lawsuits, but it's also beginning to expose exactly what the establishment is doing, which is it is promoting violence as a voting as an essential part of voting. And you see it in Virginia, you see it in Georgia, you see it everywhere. Violence and the threat of violence, in particular against minorities who would assert their constitutional right, is now part of the GOP plan to win elections. And unless it's called out, they're going to get away with their fleece vests and their Wall Street Journal.
We're going to talk more about the Virginia front in just a moment. Thank you, Juliette, Bill, Kristol. Good to have you both.